Hi everyone. So today I'm very excited to be sitting with the amazing Pam Stickney,
Hi.
and she's amazing virtuosic theremin player, improviser, yeah, just incredible musician and artist. And I'm so excited to um, have a collaboration started with her, and we are working on a wonderful piece that we just recorded, and I'm gonna hand it over to her, and maybe you can introduce yourself a little bit, and maybe talk a little bit about your artistic path and kind of where you grew up, and yeah,
Okay.
where you live now, and sort of thing. A little bit of an intro, yes.
Okay, so I was born in Los Angeles, and I started playing music when I was really young. The piano was always around the house. My mom played piano, and so that was my main instrument, and it's still the instrument that I end up gravitating towards when I'm at home alone. It's like, oh, I love polyphony, and it's sort of like, yeah, it's still like my home instrument to me. And a lot of people ask, when did you come to the theremin and how did you get into it? And it's like the journey even to that. Of course, I didn't know what one was. I had no idea that I would be playing this thing in my future. My first goal was really to play string instruments. So I'd always seen them on TV, and I thought the only string instrument I could name was a violin, of course. So finally, when I was about 12, I was going to a school that had an orchestra class, and so I signed up, on piano. But then I asked the teacher, I was like, "Can I play violin? Can I try that?" And so yeah, I took a violin home, played it, then brought it back to school the next day, and my teacher was like, "You're doing it great, but you have to like hold it on the other side." I was doing it lefty, and it's weird because these little things, I think contributed towards being advantageous for me on the theremin. I'm left-handed,
Okay.
but I then got accustomed to playing string instruments the right-handed way, which means you're controlling the pitch with your left hand and you're bowing or volume with the right hand. And so I went through the string instrument family until I finally got to the contrabass, and I was playing jazz on the bass and with rock bands also. And it was in like 97 when my friend showed me the documentary about the theremin. And so when I saw that, I thought, oh my gosh, I want to try that. That makes sense. I think I can do it.
Yeah.
And at that point, I was only playing bass, but I still missed playing, like vocal, like kind of instrument. And I was trying to acquire string instruments to borrow for doing some string arrangement ideas for some recording things. And then I thought, wait a minute, I think I could do that with a theremin, doing all the parts instead. So it's kind of like, but I had no idea that I'd be doing like, like experimental music at that point either. It's sort of like things kind of evolved over time and playing with different people. And when I relocated from LA to New York, then suddenly I was introduced to a lot of artists that were doing really different things I'd never heard, and they would show me different albums and like, have you seen this thing? Have you heard that? And so
When did you move to New York?
I moved there in the end of, I think it was the end of 2000.
Okay.
And then I left close to the end of 2005 to here in Vienna. So been in Vienna that long, and I think it's the longest time I've ever lived in one city in my life. Yeah.
Yeah. Great. Great. Yeah. Yeah, it's a wonderful path and journey, and so now you're here in Vienna, and you're performing with a band, and also a lot of as a soloist as well. So that's all really really exciting, and yeah, I just wanted to maybe touch briefly. Maybe you can talk a little bit about how becoming a mother has influenced your career and your path, and kind of yeah, your journey with your musical journey, with how does that changed, how does your focus has changed, how your inspiration has changed, and kind of talk a little bit about that.
Oh yeah, it's like it's juggling. Like I just remembered, yeah, touring and performing through pregnancy, that's also a challenge. It's like there are physical limitations, and the feet are swollen at the end of the day. You're backstage with your feet up like, oh my God. Yeah, I was, the last concert I played was like a week before I gave birth. And yeah, I had a few months of kind of downtime, quiet time. It's a total adjustment for the body, for the soul, and dealing with, wow, there's another being now that I'm caring for. And so I remember the first gig that I did, he was like proper gig. He was 4 months old. And it was a really nerve-wracking, scary thing because, on the one hand, I was totally in monkey mom mode, and just like very tuned into his needs, and at the same time, it's like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be doing a concert, and plus we're going to be flying on an airplane for the first time. It's like all of these firsts.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was, I was really lucky in that, the people at the festival, they knew what my situation was, and I just described like, yeah, like, I just, you want to know, is it going to be kind of flexible with my start time even getting on stage? Because I was just so concerned with like, what if it's exactly the feeding time for the baby? I'm his only food source right now. And, it's like, but yeah, it was really difficult, finally for the first time getting on stage and knowing there's this like, 50-minute stretch of time where I'm going to be detaching from everything I knew for the past 4 months, which is all completely new to me.
Yeah, exactly.
And put my trust in like, okay, the baby is safe, he's back there, and I'm not going to hear if he gets hungry. Yeah, and then to suddenly...
in performance mode, right?
Yeah, and when I'm so used to being tuned into hearing, because I'm sure if I heard a little tiny voice, even if it was someone else's kid in the background or a baby going, then it would probably have distracted me and like pulled me out of my focus, because it was an improvisation gig when I'm doing my solo shows, and that's that requires a real, now that I think about it, because I don't think while I'm doing it, but this kind of tuning out in a way. It's not tuning out like I'm just oblivious, but it's more going into a really heavy focus and being in the moment, and so I was nervous about, am I going to pull that off and not be distracted psychologically in my head, before I get onto the stage, but that was a really encouraging thing, just doing it, and it went fine. And so then I just made sure, I didn't take as many concerts, of course, as usual, but I would always ask for extra plane ticket for my partner, and baby is coming along, and and just give a heads up that I just had to make sure that I could still fulfill caring for a small child while at the same time having a primary caregiver also. My tiny baby is familiar with. It's like I couldn't just like pass him off to a stranger. It's like that would be too wrenching for me.
Stressful for sure. Yeah. What are some of the things that while becoming a mother have inspired you in your musical path? Like, have you written pieces kind of inspired by becoming a mother, or has it been certain in terms of maybe the way you structure time that has been like a very, I know it's like shifting gears a lot, but maybe some more specific things that have influenced your maybe writing music or even improvising, or
Oh, well, time becomes even more important than before.
Yeah.
Because before, when I didn't have to be responsible for a helpless being. It's like, even with your, friendships, relationships, everyone can understand when it's like, okay, I gotta like work now, and I'll see you in some days, and in this case, when it's like, ooh, I've got this full-time thing going on that has a lot of emotional attachment, while at the same time, it definitely, I just had to become much more focused on structuring, like budgeting my time, and I noticed that it's not the same for any two moms, no matter what their job is, or like how to structure the day, and going with the rhythm of what season we're in, and and where the baby is in his development also, is like, is he crawling around and like
Yeah.
Am I gonna like stick him in the bathtub while I'm like doing a little bit of practicing and I think artistically I haven't really written things that have anything to do with motherhood, but I just know that how I've been working and what I've been making, of course, is shaped by the management of my time and resources, and so I just noticed that I have to be very conscious and aware of there's that urge and need to make, and I need to make sure to fulfill that without feeling guilty.
Exactly. That's the other thing, like the guilty.
Yeah, and also in understanding that yes, when I'm putting my full presence into that work, then I feel a lot better and in my element when I'm then back in the mothering mode.
Yeah.
Where it's like, oh, I've made, but I think that's important as an artist or not, even though I consider it life is an art in itself, but just to make sure that to keep it up, and to still keep it as a priority as it's always been.
Yeah.
Because I think the scary thing is to I wouldn't want to lose myself in just doing activities and making things. It's like somehow I want to still have a sense of self with what I'm doing that's completely separate from the earthly tasks.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's shifting between. Yeah, I mean, for me also, like, there were moments where like, oh, maybe I can't do this, and I should just, this guilt feeling. But then I also realized that if I do the work that I want to do, the performances, the practicing, I am also happier, which means I'm also a better mother, because I do the things that I want to do, but also, I don't regret anything, and I don't feel, bad in some ways, because I spent the time that I want to on my projects, and also that makes me happy, which also affects my motherhood, and like being a good mom. So, but that's a tough struggle going between the two
it's
things.
Part of our social life, is our work life, and so it would be really hard to suddenly cut off from that social contact. I think now it's even more obvious, since the times of Corona and things being on lockdown, that not playing as much, and not it's kind of like, whoa.
Yeah, I mean,
that's even stronger than having a baby, actually.
I've had that conversation with other collaborators that this project was not really meant, it's not a pandemic project, but it became kind of that, and the pandemic now plays a big role into this project too, because
time budgeting,
and it's been specifically more difficult for women in general in the whole world, really. Having to divide time even more and be more at home and make sure that things get done, and the amount of time that we have, and
make sure fingernails are clipped.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? All of these little checklist things.
Exactly.
Is there lice?
Exactly. And also find time for yourself, which is also hard, but it's so important for many things.
Yeah.
So was there ever a time for you that you were just like, no, I can't do this, I have to give up my career because I just have to do a full-time mom thing? Like was there ever a time where oh, I don't know if I can do this physically? Did you have moments where they were it was just overwhelming?
Well, yeah, that happens many times, because there have been times where there would be an offer for something that's so time-consuming and so logistically wouldn't be possible. It's okay, there's not the budget to bring a nanny or caretaker on the road, and my son was still too young. And so then, it's he's only this age for this amount of time. And so, it was kind of this, having faith that, the art's never going to be lost, and if anything, this time is really important. And so of course it was kind of like sad, you know, like, oh, shoot, I'm gonna have to like wait on certain things, but it made it so that as my son started to get older, it's like this new life kind of opens up as, you know, the good thing is they eventually grow up and then they end up, you know, cooking for themselves, you know, clipping their own toenails and everything, and you know, these little things that are time consuming to do and to be on top of, suddenly that freedom is not taken for granted anymore. And so then it's like, oh my gosh, seize the chance, and so there's a lot more oomph put into working on things. But it's just when that time is available, because there's always, you know, like, okay, time to like make sure that, you know, need to give homework help, or, you know, there are just all of these things that kind of come up that you can't plan. It's like, shoot, like I you know, like I scraped my knee, and you run over and like, okay, here, let's put some stuff on there. You know, there are these little tiny interruptions that can happen.
Yeah, totally.
And so, or plans changing, you know, say like you're doing a kid exchange with other parents, and then, oh, that fell through, and so then that time you might have had planned for doing some work, like, okay, that's gonna have to be put off, because there's still the priority, like, you know, basic thing where it's like, okay, that's in the first, at the top and the end. But yeah, I think because of that, it does make it even more, even more, what's the word for it, like, valuable that time. It's really like made use of with what's there.
Yeah, exactly. Would you say that there's more of a support system now these days for composer, musician, artists, mothers out there? You think it's been changing a bit?
Well, I'm not sure myself, because I don't know how it's always been. Like, I've just, you know, I remembered seeing like residency applications, and, you know, or things where it's like, you know, you cannot bring a baby along, or, you know, there were things like that, or like, who's gonna mind my child while I'm like working, and that's the same too for like going on tour. I did take my son on tour a lot, actually.
Yeah, so did I, actually.
yeah. So we've seen a lot of backstages, and, you know, and then touring in that way, of course, I had to have more pauses in between to do things together with him also, because it's like, at the same time, I'm still, you know, parenting while I'm on the road. It's not like, hey, let's go hang out afterwards and go out, like, today. You know, it's like, no, I gotta, like, take care of bedtime and dinner.
Exactly.